it's a cycle, and that's what will happen over a period of 30, 40, 50 years. It's not a period of 1 year or 2 years. So we did not have an overnight. Virat Kohli did not become a sensation. We had a Sachin before that. We had a Dravid. We had a Ganguly. Name me as many badminton players or tennis players we've had. You can't, because you've not heard of them, A, and B, because you've not had them either. So like we said earlier, we are a men's cricket watching nation. We love to watch stars and we love to watch that. Unfortunately, we like to celebrate an Olympic medal for about 2 months, 3 months, and then after that it goes back to exactly where it is. You will have someone on the front page, and then again it'll go back to where it is, and then again you'll have only cricket. So it's about balancing as well. It's about a balancing act. I was telling Mithali inside that I think in all of us, unfortunately, the women's cricket has it the worst, because they are competing directly with a men's cricket, which is kind of a religion, in our country. We still are able to do it in other sports because we are a different sport completely. So, but outside of Sania Mirza, can you tell me a Mahesh and Leander, who is the 4th tennis player that you guys know? I don't think that you can, because they've never been published in that sort of way. So yeah, that's to answer your question of, how do we have more girls picking up tennis rackets? Yes, I can help. I can go and talk and I can do it, but we need it to happen, just not an individual on a sort of a, there should be a system that does that.
I actually think you can help by winning more, because the more you win, the more...
I will try.
Yeah, no. No, not in the future.
Try harder.
You've already done that. You've already done that. I think that is the way for women. And I see, for example, I read the other day that we've now, that young Indian girl boxers have done really well, because they've got Mary Kom in front of them. Mithali, do our women athletes actually a little tougher because they've had to overcome to reach where they are, and so they're actually tough by the time they get there? Are they actually tougher than most other athletes?
Well, definitely, because as Sania mentioned, that the resources that we have is very limited, and top it all is a perception in our society that women can't play sport, or they cannot.
Also, don't remember, you'll get too dark, you won't find a husband to marry. The one I get the most, or I got the most, thankfully I don't get it anymore.
So I guess that is a huge thing, because like as I mentioned, that the perception in the society, especially whether it is entrepreneurs, even people who want to support, they would say that ladki kitne saal tak khelegi, so why do we invest in her? Might as well invest in a boy, invest in a male player. So that is why when we struggle in the initial periods, we handle all
great entrepreneur who started this thing and really took it off with the whole Bollywood sexy factor, made it really, really watchable. And I know there were some efforts to do that with tennis here in India. But again, I really believe that is the gating factor. If you had, because it goes back to what you said, people in Asia don't view sports as proper business. But you know what's crazy is sports is actually the biggest business in the world. It's a $200 billion revenue business just in US alone. So actually it is much bigger than many, many industries here all over Asia. But Asians don't view it that way. And so I did some studying before I launched One Champion. It's very simple, is that because of the Industrial Revolution happened faster in North America and Europe, ahead of Asia. They went from building roads and buildings and factories to building IP-based business like software, technology, media properties, and sports. Meanwhile, Asia, lagging decades behind, India still building roads and factories and hotels and infrastructure. That was the last few decades of building. So I think the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, we're going to see a massive explosion in sports in Asia as people understand, wow, this is actually massive business. Literally, IPL went from 0 to worth a few $1 billion in a matter of years because of a great entrepreneur and a great marketing plan. So, I don't look at all the problems that Sania is pointing out and everyone on the panel as permanent. I just think it just needs great entrepreneurs who to lead the way in each sport, and you'll see that those 3 pages will end up being 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or whatever, equally split across all the sports. But right now, IPL dominates, not because of it's some intrinsic thing. It's because there's great stars, great marketing, great entrepreneurship, and great media exposure.
So do we need more marketing then? Is that what it could come down to eventually? Package stars. We're seeing that already happening in a sense with Saina and Sindhu in your sport, while they're not professionally packaged as stars, but everyone knows about them now. So is the future of sport in its packaging and selling to consumers, much like you're selling software?
Yeah, whether we like it or not, I think that's the way it is, in the sense. It has to go that way to survive. And yeah.
Is the badminton league a step in that direction?
I think we've been very, very good reviews with the badminton league. Players, lot more players getting an opportunity, and things looking good from that perspective. So we've in the BWF and in the badminton world of the league, I think badminton is one of the sports which is played around the year, and that's why you get to hear week after week almost getting. But unfortunately, somebody like a Sakshi Malik, after the Olympics, it's almost nothing, in the sense we haven't heard almost till the Commonwealth and the Asian Games. We hardly get to hear them. So definitely some sports suffer because of lack of a proper calendar, lack of proper interest in people following up. And yes, it will be tough for sports to compete against, because it's a chicken and egg thing, which Sania kind of mentioned. You get stars, you market, you need champions, you need to make stars, you need to get role models, and then the whole cycle. And then maybe cricket did it from '83, and today we are seeing it a different league. Many sports may not have that opportunity to do it, and marketing is important. I would really love to see, because when I was young, we had a state championship, we had full crowds coming. And today we have a state championship, not a single soul turns up. So I think it's a
as
challenge.
my son told me, the challenge for sport is not sport, but the challenge for sport is that Thor is releasing that week. That Thor is releasing that week, or there's some other movie releasing that week. We are now not only in the sports industry, we are in the wider catch your eyeballs industry.
So whether we like it or not, to say your answer, we have to market the sports better. And sports have to kind of innovate themselves to ensure that they are marketable.
The other big opportunity area that we are seeing in sport, because the number of people who play sport is always very small, but the number of people who think they know sport and often do know sport is much larger, but they don't actually play it. And we're seeing a big change. The smaller the game, the greater the use of analytics. In the sport that I cover, there's huge use of analytics. I know it's true of football. I know it's probably true of tennis as well. Is analytics something that is an opportunity for someone who cannot play but wants to be in the sports industry, and is that actually helping improve performance?
I mean, that's analytics, technology, whatever you call it, right? Like at the end of the day, today I can see, like, there's a machine that they put on where it analyzes if I hit a forehand, how much is the ball spinning, at what rate it's spinning. Like, I mean, it was unheard of before. There's a court in Indian Wells where everybody just goes there and sees, they practice for an hour, and then they can analyze basically how much. So a person who has not played sport, it's probably easier for them to understand the velocity that the ball is spinning or how fast it's going or whatever. Like my backhand was, I mean, I don't know, like on a constant basis, 30 miles slower than my forehand. So, but that is something over an hour. So it takes, so yeah, it does help to maybe understand the sport. But I think when you do play a sport and, you know, like we have or we are, we still see it differently, and probably he's right. We're seeing it as athletes, which is why we are, I mean, I don't agree that we need Bollywood to make our sport popular or any sport popular. It's a separate industry. So what he's saying is that, yeah, there's an entrepreneurship where the entrepreneur is great. He's gotten Bollywood and made it sexy, but that's not what we're playing sport for. That goes back to what Gopi was saying. Why did we start playing sport? Kabaddi is, I mean, you can have Bollywood in Kabaddi, but you're not going to make it sexy.
No, I think what he's saying is you bake a great cake and wrap it in brown paper. People are not buying it. So you bake a great cake and you wrap it in lovely paper, increase the price by a little bit, but you add to the viability of your product. So you can be a great athlete, but if you're wrapped in brown paper, no one's buying you. I think that's the point he's making.
But I don't think that's right, because I think that you still have, you know, you make a movie on Mary Kom. Who had heard of Mary Kom before Mary Kom was made? How many people? I mean, I don't know. I don't see any hands up here. So, or two. Okay. So I think that, yeah, Bollywood is great and all that, and you, like you're saying, you can put it in a golden wrapper and you can showcase it. But at the end of the day, that's why we need to become a sporting nation where we celebrate sport. We don't have to celebrate sport through another channel, is what I'm saying. But I think that's just emotion talking because I'm an athlete.
True. Bollywood is a great example. I know they don't hate the word Bollywood, so let's just say the Indian film industry is a great example of sometimes great talent and sometimes extremely average talent, making it because it's well packaged. So maybe packaging is the answer.
So I think, you know, Tanya's onto something that you know, sports at its essence should be pure, and that's why athletes are attracted to it. But the reality is, if you look at any multi-billion-dollar sports media property in the world, it all starts with phenomenal marketing and a lot of Bollywood type of elements to create the glamour behind a star athlete like Sania. You see, if we just presented her as a tennis player and that's it, and hear her titles, no one would care. But if you start to glamorize it a little bit and put on a little bit of wow factor, her life story or the trials and tribulations or, you know, TV series or whatever, you know, at the end of the day, sports is a media business. That's the reality. And if all these athletes want to make a lot of money and make a proper living, if we want to build more hard courts, if we want to build all that, it all begins with hiring a rock star CEO who can package everything in gold paper, right?
So you need storytellers. It's good to know that somebody thinks that storytellers.
Oh no, most definitely.
have a role to
Storytelling
play.
is everything in sports. Storytelling is everything.
But he's absolutely right. You tell the story of how Sania started playing tennis on a cow dung court. You tell the story of how Mithali. Tell the story of how you started playing cricket. I mean, once those stories get told, then the aura around the athlete grows. Then there's another young girl somewhere who's saying, "Oh, if Mithali could start like that, I could." And then we start the whole process. The storytelling starts creating champions. Is that what we're heading at?
Well, it is important that you need
water
to
tank,
have
right? No, cement tank.
yeah. Way back, we didn't have any infrastructure, and because we were not under BCCI, we were under WCI, so the kind of facilities which were access to women's cricket was far lesser than what it is now. It has come a long way since then. Before playing as an India player, I've traveled in trains unreserved, and I have also prepared myself on matting wickets before getting into international series playing on a turf. So it was very difficult, but again, the earlier question that when he asked what kind of how women players get strong mentally is that when we prepare so hard, today when we have access to the best of facilities, our game is enhanced by leaps and bounds. Had this facility been given much earlier, maybe we would have produced far better cricketers, because with that kind of resources, we still had very quality players back then. So just imagine if we had those players playing in the current situation, the standard of the game would have increased by miles. So it is important that you need to have the best facilities and the infrastructure. But again, there are some sports, there are some players who may not be financially that sound, who have access to those kind of facilities. But again, if you have a role model who've gone through a lot in the initial periods and have played international cricket, that kind of a life story will inspire a lot of these talents from the rural areas, because that's where they don't get those facilities, and yet we have some amazing talents coming from districts, and they migrate to cities for those facilities, and then they make it big. So it is important. You need to have role models. You need to have stories where young girls or young boys look up to, role models who they can look up to and take inspiration from.
There's a bit of packaging going on around you as well, isn't it? You're on magazine covers these days, and also that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a sexist thing that I point out, but it's just that when you get onto magazine covers and you look a certain way, then it helps people draw attention to the fact that you play sport a certain way as well. So it's not only wrong. It need not be only right, but it's not only wrong either. Since we're also taught the business of sport, have you seen a revolution in what people are wearing, in the gear that there is, in the performance tools of the sport as well?
Yes, yes, definitely, because technology has definitely impacted the way the players prepare themselves, because like for example in cricket we have the video analyst tagging along with the team, where he shoots the matches and we get the feedback at the end of the match, and as players we bank a lot on those feedbacks to prepare ourselves for the coming games, and also you have these lyrometers and nutritionists, the sports nutritionist. Earlier we never really thought much about the nutrition or diet that a sports person has to go through, but today there's so much of counseling happening around diet, and you have a sports psychologist traveling with the team. So I think it is important. Technology has definitely played a huge role, because these days when you see a lot of matches where a bilateral series, the third country is actually watching both the matches live, and they can plan when they are going to play you next. So they have a feedback on you, what you've done 2 series back. I have a feedback on how many times in a way I have got out in the last 10 innings. So it really helps a player to enhance their game. And you have the bowling machine. You don't need a bowler, in the practice during a training sessions. You can just fix a bowling machine and you can just bat for hours and hours. So I think that that way
I'm told you bat for hours and hours, even if there's bowlers at the other end.
Well, I definitely would want to have more practical training session than the bowling machine, though.
Yeah, when you get the 13, 14-year-olds, or is it even younger, 10, 11-year-olds, are you seeing advances in nutrition? Are you seeing advances in sports technology, in gear as well? And are those opportunities for people who don't play sport, for example? Because we're also talking the business of sport. Is nutrition products, for example, a big sports category?
Well, many of these things are there in the market, in the sense, many of these things
Some are good and some are not so good, right?
Some
You're
are
so
not
polite. You're trying very nicely to say some are good and some are not so good.
just because somebody knows to build a machine and they've used it for something else, it's not necessary that sport has to use it in a certain way. So you have many fields which have come up which are not so relevant, because you know from a naked eye that these things, it is the way it is. And probably sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not really helpful. So we need to draw a distinction between that. And technology in sport is young. It's badminton also, it's young. We found it useful. It is helping us scale things up to the next level, and that's where it is. But still, as Mithali mentioned, I think still practical is better, or the human eye, sometimes I would still trust that better.
There's also a new business model probably emerging of coaching coaches, and maybe when Gopi's had enough of coaching players, he can coach more. He can coach more coaches, and they can literally go into the smaller towns. One last question to you, Abhi. Since you mentioned that the leagues and that the commercial side of sport grew much more in Europe and America before it came into Asia, is Asia, and I can talk to you about India, but in your experience, is Asia a paying society, or is Asia an entitlement society where we want things but don't want to pay for them? And if we don't pay for them, then the sport as an industry does not grow. So do we just want everything free to air television, or are we willing to pay to watch sport and participate in sport?
Right. So I think you have to look at the supply chain. So yes, in Asia, fans are not used to paying for tickets. That's a fact all over. And again, it's because
In
sports.
Delhi, nobody pays.
so
Well, everywhere actually.
no, but the reason why is, again, it goes back to the history of the region relative to Europe and relative to North America. I think there will be a day in the future where when sports is run by sophisticated entrepreneurs across Asia, that tickets will be a source of revenue. But the reality is, again, for every major sport, tickets are a small percentage of revenue. The real big people that pay are actually the media broadcasters, right? The Star TVs of the world, or Fox Sports or whoever it is. These guys, because their whole business model is based on advertising and eyeballs, they have to get great content, and they'll pay massive dollars. I'll give you an example. NFL, which is the world's largest sports league, the National Football League in America, has $13 billion in revenues, of which $7 billion comes from media rights. So literally broadcasters paying NFL so CBS or NBC or these guys for the right to air the content. That is where the big money is at. So it doesn't really matter if the fan is paying or not paying, because as long as they're watching, there's massive monetization. If fans are watching, okay, like let's take IPL as an example, all the sponsors will line up. All of the major sponsors will line up to fund, and if they come to fund, and then there's on top of it, the broadcast media rights, then all the athletes are going to make a ton of money, and then it's a self-fulfilling cycle. So that's the side that, again, I think the average athlete or the average person thinks, oh, they're not paying tickets, it's never going to be a big business. Oh, there's no tennis courts. Oh, there's no. The reality, everything starts with media.
And we're seeing that a little bit in India as well, where in the sport that I cover, the amount of money that you're earning from rights is so much that the best way a lot of you can actually participate in the business of sport is, believe it or not, since you're not all athletes in this, the athletes are in the majority here, is actually by being the eyeballs. The more eyeballs you provide, the more money comes into sport, the more money filters into the athletes. Now, whether it all filters into the athletes is a separate story completely, but in course of time it will. So if you think you're just a passive person, you're still in the business of sport, if you're providing the eyeballs that draw in the networks who feed the money into sport. I mean, since Saina made it big and Sindhu followed a couple of years later, I'm suddenly seeing a lot more badminton on television. I hadn't seen that much badminton on television before. So Saina started it, and then with Sindhu coming in, there's a lot more badminton on television. I think people started watching mixed doubles and ladies doubles because Sania was in it. We didn't watch it before that. Because you were playing, since you started doing well, more and more the Indian sport started being seen on television. I mean, I remember there's a Wimbledon going on or US Open going on, but they actually take time off to show your game or Leander's game or Mahesh's game. So as you create stars, if more and more people start watching, then more and more people come in as well. So maybe you should just create more stars while you're one. Start the process of creating the next one.
I'll try while I'm trying to win as well more.
No,
like
you will win. Don't worry. You can see why she's very good return of serve. She's got a fantastic return of serve, because I'm going to start moving a little more in that direction. Right. So if there's any questions that a lot of you have for this panel, I'm happy to take them, because I've asked a few and I've got a very happy job. I only have to ask questions without knowing the answers.
Hi, my name is Sunil. I'm part of a venture capital firm based out of Bangalore. Among all the legends present out here,
Gopi is a very good investment.
we know that. There's one more legend on the other side of here. We have got amongst us Shekhar Nayak, who's a Padma Shri Award winner and former captain of the blind cricket team. He's out here. He has come all the way from Bangalore just to meet Gopichand and Mithali, and he wants to start academy for the blind cricketers, and he wants to learn more from Gopichand.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. So this 2018, I'm planning to open a cricket academy for blind cricketers. As you know, for blind cricket, there is no affiliation, no recognition. So I want to work in the grassroots level. So I'm planning to open an academy. I need some advice from Gopichandji. Thank you.
Now, if a lot of you are wondering how do the visually impaired disabled actually play a sport, I was once invited, and I know I'm not a panelist, but I'll just tell you the story very quickly. I was once invited to a visually impaired cricket tournament final. And I was very curious because I knew that they follow sound rather than the actual ball coming at them. And so the balls actually got a lot of ball bearings, and it's like a rattle. It comes your way, and people play it by the sound. So I said, right, I am going to bat now. And so I closed my eyes, and I said, let me follow the sound of the ball coming. I missed it by a yard. That is how difficult that game is. And I think one of the mistakes that we all make in sport is we try to look for one sport in what is inherently another sport. So we look for Virat Kohli in Mithali Raj. She's got her own skills. Virat's got his own skills. Similarly, with the disabled sport, we need to look at it as a different sport, and then suddenly you'll start going, wow. This is what happens when you see the Paralympics, for example. You suddenly see the Paralympics and you go, wow, are they really that good? And when you saw the Indian high jumper, we went, wow, can you really be that good? So, well done, good to hear from you. Professor Gopi is good. Yeah. Sorry, she's got the mic, so we'll come to you in a minute. It's like tenancy who got it there.
Good afternoon. While I understand it's important to have entrepreneurs, stars, and coaches, one thing I wanted to hear the panel mention is making parents aware, because parents are the most important decision makers in terms of, is it academics or is it sports? And I ask this because I have two daughters. Both of them are in table tennis for the last 5 years. They don't want to carry out tech business anymore. They don't want to join medical or science or the regular profession. My older one wants to be in sports diplomacy. No idea what that is. The second one wants to do sports science. And now these are very viable career alternatives. And we didn't know about them until a few months ago, so we started doing the research. So I think it's important that parents need to be aware that it's not just being a player. Well, that's also important. There are other related things that girls or sports athletes can do. And I just wanted your opinion on that. Thank you.
Oh, physiotherapy is one of them. Actually, my last question, but I've been asking too many, so I dropped that, was about education and jobs. One of the other reasons, one of the other problems in our society is that the moment you get into the workforce, you're expected to work 12 hours a day, 6 hours a week, because 6 days a week, because someone else somewhere must sleep well, and so we must work through the night. So it takes away a lot of people. When they enter the workforce, they stop playing amateur sport, and when they get into 10th standard, they stop playing competitive sports. Gopi, you want to take that?
Well, I think when I truly started playing sport and taking it as a career when I got a job. I think that was the day when we decided that for the rest of my life I have playing sport as my career. But true, when we had say 20 people playing, there were 10 jobs, and 10 people had to find their own way with other jobs. But today, with the number of people playing sport increase, the number of jobs in sport or the champions who are produced in sport is not improving. And since there's a 99% likely chance that you won't make it as a champion, that's the reality of sport. And we don't have a safety net around the sports persons who are out of sport. That's also a reality. We don't have our education system mature enough, and this is where I come back to what Sania had said regarding the culture of sport and a maturity of a sporting ecosystem. It's not about all people winning. We will not have all people winning. It is not possible. We have to have a system, and this is where entrepreneurs, if you look at, I would really want global sport to be taken out of the picture. It is not global. Sport is local. When you look at the newspaper front page, you will see all local news. What KCR did, what KTR did, or when you turn back, suddenly you see EPL coming. Where transfer fees of EPL, where does that come into the picture? So we have all sport, first page is all local, and last page is all global. It doesn't work. Sport is primarily local. And we need to spend and celebrate our local heroes and make sport viable for community champions, district champions, state champions, and we need to celebrate them. And the other thing around sport is sports diplomacy, sports administration, sports science, commentators, physiotherapists.
Thank you.
All of these needs to be in the business, sports entrepreneurs. All of them need to be kind of looked at, and we need to celebrate sport by itself, not champions per se. And somewhere entrepreneurs here, someday we need to find a way in which sport is looked beyond winning. everybody who plays sport, if there is an app which can measure the happiness quotient which they win, if there's an app which celebrates and tells us the health benefits which they get, an app which tells them what character building helps by sport, if those are elements which can be measurable, then everybody who plays sport is a champion. And that day, that is the day which I would really want to see. And I'm against, in a way, global sport. Because if global sport was everything, then I don't think we in our country can ever run 100 meters. Because only Western Africa's one particular group of DNA has won 100 meters ever. And all of Eastern Africa is, from Kenya, is all one long distance and marathons. So we should never, but there is a definite 100% reason why sport needs to be played, and it is beyond winning. And that is what we need to focus on, and that is where I think I would really love entrepreneurs to put their heads on to see what sport does.
The other thing you should probably tell them is something I experienced when I was in college. Luckily, I grew up in a city that had 36 hours in a day. Mumbai seems to have about 3 hours in a day. Hyderabad had about 36 hours in a day. And I discovered there's many, many more hours. You can play sport 3 hours a day and study 3 hours a day and sleep 8 hours a day, and there's still enough hours left to read a book. But one of the biggest dangers to sport that's coming up at the moment is what is taking development everywhere, and that's your cell phone. So you take away the cell phone for a while, there's time for everything. And I think what Gopi said is absolutely right. I was a fringe sports person. I played school, college, university, and that was it. But I learned to win and lose. I've cried in a dressing room because we lost an inter-college final, and I've gone, how did that ball go to the boundary? Not supposed to, and do a little jig because I was 8 not out. So I think everybody should play sport. And then if you can become a career, great. Otherwise, you still become a better human being.
Hello?
You know what you need to do? You need to grab a mic, because whoever's got the mic speaks louder. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tanvir. I'm from Bangladesh. So the questions for the panel in general, but perhaps Mr. Sitiok would be the best person to answer. Is there a way to address the pyramid structure in individual sports? Like, say, if you have a team sport, say football or basketball, you'd have a person who's been in a team for 5 years, probably very less playing minutes, but once he or she retires, he might be financially well off to, like, say, buy a house and maybe live reasonably comfortably. Doesn't have to be a champion. But if you look at, say, boxing, MMA, tennis, badminton, no one knows the number 2 guy, which reflects on the finances, and which means every time an athlete, or no matter how talented he or she is, he's always thinking, okay, I need to pay my bill, or what I'm going to do after retirement. So I'm not saying that the number 2 or 3 guys everyone has to be a multi-millionaire or something, but like at least so that a safety net is ensured. So can that be addressed in any way or something? Thank you.
I appreciate those ideals, but the reality is, if you look at any industry, any job, if you suck, you're not going to get paid. If you're the best at your job, you can get paid, right? So why shouldn't that be for sports? If you're genuinely the #1, the best tennis player in the world, like Serena Williams, you should get paid better than everyone else. Who cares about the number 2, number 3, number 4, if you're not the best in your... I'm just saying, like, there's a gradient that's natural. So, you know, it's the same for any company. If you work for Airtel, or if you work for, you know, any other company, that's, you know, the CEO is going to make more than the junior intern, right? So, I mean, the whole concept of safety net, I don't subscribe to. That's a socialist mentality. I think that, you know, for whatever it is, I mean, it goes back to our caveman era, you know, Darwinian theory of nature. That's, you know.
Hey, Harsha, hi. Hey, this is Sam, and I work for Dell.
Yeah,
Just
Sam,
a quick
give me
question.
literally a second. I think it's also a little cultural, because in our middle class mindset, we always look for safety nets. And it's interesting because there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this room. We had a batch reunion some years ago, and some of the young graduates asked the successful entrepreneurs, didn't you have a safety net? And the truth is that they said the safety net, if it is within reach, is something you will go to all the time. And so the greatest entrepreneurs are those who don't have a safety net. But I think with athletes, it's a separate issue, because we have to keep our local reality in mind too. Yeah.
Hi. So, not an entrepreneur yet. I work for Dell.
I like the way you said yet, not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been saying that for 15 years, though. Very quick question. I know you touched upon the point of political people running sports. I have a similar view when I look at entrepreneurs creating businesses related to sport. I see that many entrepreneurs who are doing stuff in the sports arena are some way have been connected with sports. Do you see that's a disadvantage of some kind, because then maybe they're not innovating, they're just building stuff that they're seeing around, unlike many other industries where people who have nothing to do with the industry suddenly jump upon it and try to use IT, technology, innovation to create stuff, versus what happens in sports is like a bowling machine. Someone saw someone's hands aching forever.
And I don't know if that's good or bad, but so you'll find the head of Microsoft is a cricket nerd. You'll find the head of Google is a cricket nerd. Anybody who's ever breathed air in this country is a cricket nerd. We need to change that very quickly. Her father played cricket as well, so but he did well. He produced a tennis player, so that's all right.
That's the balance he found, though.
But I think if you've got interest in a sport and you've played a little bit of that sport, then you start thinking more along those lines, saying, can I do something different within the sport as well? So I don't think playing a sport comes in the way of trying to innovate within the sport, because if you were very good at sport, you would have become a champion at it. Because you're not good at sport, now you want to push your energy somewhere. But I don't know, anyone else wants to ask that question, whether you can get the best ideas from outside the ecosystem?
I mean, I think to be a sports entrepreneur, you first and foremost have to have love. I mean, I've done martial arts for 30 years. It's my greatest passion in life. I train every single day to this day. I love it. That's why I'm doing it. It's not because I'm doing it for money or anything. If you get anyone else to come in to do a sport as an entrepreneur who is coming for the money perspective, I think it'll ruin it. It'll ruin it. So I think there's a beauty in the fact that everyone here are sports people, and that in the future, if they do contribute to sports, there's many ways to contribute to sport other than just being an athlete. So for me, I think it's paramount.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
for
much.
being here